Okay. All right, it is 6:30, and I would like to call the meeting of the Transportation Public Infrastructure Committee for Wednesday, September the 3rd, to order at 6:30. We have is this on? We have. It
doesn't sound like it's on. Your voice doesn't.
On.
Oh.
Yeah. It's on?
Yep. Perhaps if Mr. Martin in the back.
Just really quiet. Okay, then we're good. We have an agenda. Michael and Emmett, are there any changes? Seeing none, can I have somebody to move approval of the agenda, please? So moved, Mr. Green. All those in favour? Carried. We have one set of minutes to adopt. I gave Nora a couple of editorial changes. Are there any other changes, omissions, errors that anyone is aware of? Seeing none, could I have somebody approve the minutes? Thank you, Mr. Small. All those in favour? Carried. There is no old business. Lots of interesting new business. Report. Request to allow artificial turf on city property in front of 396 Royal Bay. Michael, are you taking this one?
You may recall that there was a previous request to install artificial turf, and the committee turned it down. This one is the only other one I can recall. And as you can see from the summary, the request was received after they were advised by staff that the placement of the material was not authorized by the city and is not an approved landscape finish, which is based on committee's previous decision, as well as lack of any approval of that in our bylaws. So the property is at 396 Royal Bay Drive, and they're asking that the artificial turf be allowed to eliminate maintenance and watering demands. And we've given the source of the turf, if you want to get into that detail. And certainly brown is a common color for grass in Colwood in the summer because of the cost of watering and the watering restrictions. As we've pointed out in the report, because this turf would be in the boulevard, which is the reason why it needs a permit, there would be issues if we needed to cut a trench through the boulevard. They're perhaps not insurmountable, but it's an entirely new thing for us to deal with, and probably we would develop ways of doing this over time. But I can see that slicing the turf, opening it, and then trying to get it to fit back together seamlessly might be tricky, and maybe the proponents can offer some advice on that. And an alternate solution to the grass boulevard may be to allow some other form of landscaping that doesn't require watering. So financial implications, we've said there will be a cost to reinstatement if we have to do any work in the boulevard. And so the recommendation is to deny the request in line with the previous denial, the request to allow the artificial turf to remain on the city's property and to replace it with soil and seed or sod as permitted in the bylaws. Thank you.
Thank you. You folks are in the audience. If you don't mind coming to the microphone, we'd love your name and address for the record.
My name's Randy Ennis. I'm the resident at 396 Royal Bay Drive. I just newly moved to Colwood from Langford. I had this installation done on my last property in Langford, and truly, folks, if I'd known this was going to be an issue, I would have come and seek approval before. Having said that, I know that some of the other municipalities in the area here, Esquimalt, View Royal, Langford, are using this treatment in their boulevard, city-owned boulevards. Some of them are actually using it in schoolyards because of its durability. It's aesthetically pleasing. Doesn't allow weeds to go through it or on it, and no herbicides required, no fertilizers required. Now, I know your concern at this point, or at least from listening to the gentleman here, is that if any work had to be done on the boulevard, that you folks would be on the hook if the material had to be removed from repairs or anything done to the service corridor underneath the boulevard. I would fully expect to look after that on my own. If it had to occur, I would take responsibility for that. I would remove, and actually would remove it from that boulevard. The thing is, it's fairly easy to do. It's like rolling up a piece of carpet, basically. And some of your other approved landscape features, like river rock, would be much harder to remove than the actual artificial turf itself, or bark mulch. And again, I looked at some of the other properties in the neighborhood that have those treatments, and obviously they're not being very well maintained. There's weeds cropping up through it. Aesthetically, it doesn't look very pleasing. And maintenance-wise, obviously, would be a lot more work if you had to remove those materials to actually get to the service corridors under the boulevard. If you looked at the pictures, and I don't think you've had a chance to look at the submission I gave to Deanna Eden, there's actual pictures that it shows the actual installation of itself. It shows that the service corridor or patchways have been left open so they could actually get into those things. If you had to rip up the whole corridor, then yeah, it's as simple as just removing that material, rolling it up, and then just digging away. I wouldn't expect the city to pay for that. I would accept those responsibilities, or I would accept those costs.
Great, thank you.
In a nutshell, folks.
Welcome to Colwood.
Anyway,
This is
yeah.
probably not the
What a
best.
welcome.
This is not the best introduction, but we're really usually very friendly.
Yeah, and you know what, folks, like I say, if I knew this was going to cause an issue, I would have come before you and sought permission to actually do that. I had no idea it was going to be an issue. And I've been in law enforcement long enough to know that bylaw complaints are usually driven by somebody not happy with something. I get that and I understand that. Hopefully that you folks have a chance to at least debate this and make a decision. I'd be grateful if you would consider it and allow me to keep the installation. If not, I will certainly abide by the council's decision here and do what's appropriate.
Okay. So committee will debate it tonight, and then the process is whatever recommendation we make then goes to the council meeting next Monday night, and that's where the actual decision is made. So just so you're aware, that's how the process works.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Then would I be informed one way or the other, I take it?
Yes, we would ask Nora to make sure you're informed. You'll obviously know you'll be here for whatever we decide tonight, and that's the recommendation that will be put in front of council, but council is its own beast, and sometimes it agrees with committee and sometimes it doesn't, so
Okay.
just
Well, I
so
appreciate
you're
it,
aware.
and I appreciate the chance of at least getting to speak to it and,
Okay.
and meeting you guys.
Right.
So,
So,
yeah.
so hang on in there. I wanted to ask committee if they had any questions for you.
Okay, certainly.
I know a little
Greg.
bit about this stuff, only because Bill Hoskins used to work with me, and he's the guy who did your install in Langford and here.
That's correct.
And 19th Turf, this guy is meticulous in his work, and I can definitely speak to the quality of his work. And I don't know if it's as easy as rolling it up, but because Bill is crazy, and he is it's difficult to put into words how meticulous this guy is, but he does really, really good work. And I guess the only concern I have with this is that while you're willing to share the cost, if
Not
you
share
just-
the
or
cost.
pay, pay for the cost, yeah. Is there a way that a covenant can be put on the property that would say that in the likelihood that you sell, that the next owners would also be responsible, because like Bill, this stuff doesn't go away. It will last forever, and I know that he sourced out a great product, and I'm very comfortable with it. In fact, I've suggested at meetings before that we would maybe look at this product too, only because it stays green year round, it doesn't fade, it really is a good product. There's some downsides to it as well. But that would be my big concern as well. I appreciate that you're willing to do that, and that was going to be my suggestion, is that we would just leave it in place until it comes time to lift it up, and then if you can't or weren't prepared to pay for it, then we would then put in the alternative. I don't know how that sits with the bylaws and what kind of ruling we'd need on that, but if a covenant could be put on the property, that the next homeowner would do the same, because the stuff will last.
Well, absolutely.
So-
And that's why I installed it, to be honest with you. And you're right, the gentleman, 19th Full Turf, Bill, he's very meticulous, and if you had a chance to actually review the installation, you'd understand that it really is well done. And if you go to his website, 19th Full Turf, you can see all the projects that he's done in the local area here, and it's very impressive.
Mhm.
Like I say, it's actually being used in schoolyards, sports fields, and some of the neighboring municipalities. I know they have those treatments in their city-owned boulevards as well.
All right. So, Michael, can I ask you then, in terms of Greg's question, is there a means through highway use permit or something like that where there can be an agreement made with a homeowner that if there's a need to go in there, that cost is borne by the homeowner?
Yeah, it's an encroachment agreement. It's not that unusual for private properties to own something that's actually in the municipal right-of-way. For instance, stratas often have pipes that cross the municipal right-of-way. And we do an encroachment agreement which basically acknowledges that that person still owns that piece of infrastructure, in this case the turf, and they're still responsible for it. And it can even get into great detail about how they have to respond if the municipality doesn't want it there anymore for some reason.
Okay. And is there a cost for getting an encroachment agreement?
It's going to cost at least $500, maybe more.
I've been willing to say that.
Gib.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I put this through the chair to Mr. Baxter. Would there be a simpler way of, in the portion of the bylaw that deals with the minimum specifications for boulevards, if we were to put a section in the bylaw that specifically said, these are what the minimums are, anybody who wishes to finish their boulevard with something that exceeds our minimums can do so at their own cost and at their own risk. The municipality of Colwood accepts no cost liability should that boulevard need to be accessed for services. And that way, with it being in the bylaw, we're not having to deal with individual permits for each person. We have another one that's coming up, item number 3, that is, under different circumstances, the same thing. And if the bylaw was to be changed such that it's totally the homeowner's responsibility, if Colwood has to access that, then the homeowner has the option of replacing back with what they had before, or just accepting the fact that Colwood is only going to cover it and grass it. And they can make that decision at the point in time that the access has to be dug. I think it would save us a lot of work, and it would save the applicants a lot of work, as long as we have something in there that uses the term exceeds, so that we don't have somebody who's, just leaves their boulevard at less than what our minimums require.
I'm not sure you'd use the term exceeds, because there might be a lot of argument about what exceeds what.
Okay.
There are those who believe that, grass and trees is the ultimate. But we could easily put something in the new bylaw that says that people can choose other finishes and, as you say, be responsible for them. And it would, say that they have to get an encroachment agreement, everything like that. We would probably try to enumerate the sorts of boulevard coverings that would be found acceptable. There are some coverings, like actually river rock, that we don't like because the rocks tend to get chucked out on the road, and then that becomes a danger to drivers and pedestrians. So we'd still have a limited range, but we could make it much more open than it is now.
Yeah. And I'm very much in favor of people who wish to spend a little more money on beautifying their boulevard. The environmental aspect of it is beneficial both to the homeowner and to the city. So if we could do it in a simpler manner, I'd be all in favor of that.
Thank you. Cody.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Just curious what the turf rests on. What the base is?
Compacted sand.
Oh, it is, eh?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's natural compacted sand.
So for drainage and all that.
Compacted, and then he nails the product into the ground.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm kind of with Gib as well. I'd hate to be, throw down the heavy hammer and say, it's going to cost you $500 to beautify. Even if you're willing to.
Because I know
Yeah.
I say that in watering and everything else. Because unlike a lot of the residents in that area, I wouldn't let it go brown.
Yeah.
I wouldn't let weeds crop through it. It looks horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, these people pay a lot of money for those homes, and let that boulevard, because they have to pay for water, and then maintaining it, mowing it and fertilizing it. They just let it go. And so, you drive up in those beautiful homes, and you see the majority of the boulevard in that area not being maintained.
Yeah.
They'll cut it, but there's weeds cropping up through it. It's a bit of a fire hazard, actually, as well. So, I'd even pay the $500 if that's what it took, folks. I'd actually.
And I'm the kind of guy that I actually like a green lawn. So if you drove by my house, you'd see my lawn is perfectly green. And
It's not 19-fold.
no, well, it's perfectly green, and there's many benefits to a green lawn as well, environmentally, and I don't think we have anything in our bylaw that mandates residents to maintain their boulevards in front of their house, and that's pretty evident by some property, right? So I also don't want to discourage folks from doing something innovative and sprucing it up. I guess, and I don't really see putting the turf down as, it's going to boom, like everybody's going to do it.
It is rather expensive.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would say this, though. If somebody was going to put turf, I would ask that you make sure that it's professionally installed.
Yeah. Not the stuff you lie on your
Not
back
the stuff
deck.
you get at Costco.
Yeah, yeah. The
Professionally
good stuff.
installed By somebody that's professional in this.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. Thank you.
I took the opportunity to go past your house because I wanted to have a good look, and it does look very nice. Actually, all of the landscaping you've done around does look very nice. So I'm probably, unlike Councillor Logan, I tend to prefer a lawn that goes yellow in the summer, but that's a personal preference, so I'm not going to throw that one in. And I like Gibbs' suggestion of are there ways that we can make it simpler for people who want to go, if you like, above and beyond, and encourage folks to take responsibility for their boulevards. We've done that in other ways at this committee, where we've encouraged the sort of the rain garden approach, which I think is nice that we can do. My question to you, Michael, is, this is part of a kind of a bigger piece of thinking around a bylaw change. So that's likely to take, in other words, it's not going to happen by next month. So is the reality that we should look at doing some kind of, if that's committees and council's wish, doing some kind of agreement with this landowner for now, and look at changing the bylaw down the road, or what's...
Well, I think at this moment, committee needs to decide whether they like this idea, and if they do, approve it. Down the road, if we change the bylaw, it'll then likely follow committee's lead, although there could be a new committee and a new council by then. But either way, it's going to need an encroachment agreement if the homeowner's going to carry the cost of peeling it back, letting us do what we need to do, and then replacing it. And so that won't change. So you should still include in any resolution to approve it a requirement for the encroachment agreement. And we have a standard encroachment agreement. We would be able to make a few small changes to that, give it to the applicant, and that should then reduce the cost of any legal cost to implement the encroachment agreement. Depends how good your lawyer is.
Right. So it sounds like where committee is going is perhaps sort of a two-part motion. Sort of the first part talks about an encroachment agreement for this particular homeowner, and then either a second motion or broader direction around future bylaw. Emmett, you look like you were about to jump in.
No, I was having a different conversation.
a problem that's cropping up later, but
Okay.
we'll deal with it.
Well, yes, we'll get to later. Okay.
Yeah, I think any direction that you give us, along the way over the months before the bylaw is actually ready, will help us to refine the bylaw. It records what your feeling is on these things, and then that gets implemented.
Okay. Good.
Through the chair to Mr. Baxter, if the bylaw gets changed, will you still need an encroachment agreement?
Yes.
Even if the bylaw says the homeowner is responsible for repairing anything other than replacing grass?
The problem is that you can't put that on the homeowner if they haven't chosen it, unless you put something on title that runs with the property. So in other words, some future homeowner moving into town would be entitled to believe that this is standard boulevard treatment by the city of Colwood and is under no obligation. And but by putting something on title, that's a notice to the future homeowner.
Okay, and if that's the case, if it's required anyway, then I guess my suggestion is moot, although it would spell it out easier for anybody who decides to inquire into the bylaw as to whether they can make changes to their boulevard or not. But
Yeah.
my suggestion was to try and avoid the paperwork for each one of these applications if it's going to be required anyway.
Well, it's going to
Then-
avoid this whole process.
Yeah. Okay.
It just means we hand them the encroachment agreement, they
Right.
get their lawyer to register it, it's done.
Thank you.
Okay.
And like I say, folks, I'll be willing to pay the cost of the encroachment.
So can we craft a motion? Gib.
I'd make a motion that we approve this application with the inclusion of an encroachment agreement. And, sorry,
Is your mic?
I'd make a motion that we approve this application. And
So option number one.
so option number one, with an encroachment agreement signed with the municipality. And secondly, that staff investigate changes to the bylaw to allow for a simpler process for these applications.
Michael, does that wording work for you?
Works for me, yep.
Okay. Any other comments from committee? Sorry, go ahead.
The only issue I have is with the previous residents that spoke of this back a couple of years ago. We denied their request completely to put in the turf, didn't we? And
We did, although there were some other complications there. That was a issue that had been going on for some time, and there were previous events around that property, so I think that may have.
I guess the only reason I suggest that is that would we have any obligation to notify that homeowner that this was a possibility that we didn't consider at the time? Because I don't recall having the discussion about this kind of covenant or agreements that's possible to them. And I don't recall all the circumstances with that, but I do recall it coming before us, and I don't know if we have an obligation to notify them because it's in the same neighborhood. So are they going to be, hey, why did they get to do it and we have a brown lawn?
Yeah.
Even though a brown lawn, I agree, even though mine is green, but that's just because of, it was accidental watering for the beds. The lawn is in the way. That's what happened. It's not intentional. It's accidental. Collateral watering.
There's no obligation to
Okay.
inform anybody, but it might be nice to do so.
It might be nice, it may even be different owners by now, I don't know, and it's not, I know it's not the burning issue. Other than that one thing, I'm very happy with the suggestion or the recommendation.
But it does call to mind that when we implement the new bylaw, that we should probably undertake a campaign of informing people, what the new bylaw does allow or prohibit or, require. And this greater openness as to what the boulevard coverings could be would be one of those issues that we try and inform the public about.
Thank you.
Okay, so moved by Gib, If there's no further discussion, I will call the question. All those in favour? Carried.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
That will go to council Monday night.
Thank
And council is at 7. You're welcome to come. They're all open meetings. If you get really excited about it, you can watch all of our meetings online, live, or recorded.
Anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
Good like that. Thank you very much, folks.
Thanks for coming out. Okay. Item 4.2, request by resident 3305 Crowhurst Place to top city trees on Lagoon Road. Michael, do you get this one too?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is not an unusual request in, shall we call it, the southeast slope of Colwood, where the views are to be had. But it is normal city policy to only deal with dead, diseased, or dangerous trees, and not to trim trees or any vegetation simply because of site view issues. However, this resident has asked for permission to have somebody top or trim the trees. Unfortunately, I'm not sure at this point whether these trees would be trees that might be affected by future works of the developer. Whether all or some of them would be, so that this may be an issue that partially gets resolved by that. We don't know till we know more about the developer's plans, as they have only recently applied for rezoning, and we're still going through that rezoning process. However, in the meantime, we have this application, and it is for a committee to recommend on whether the request to top trees on Lagoon Road be approved.
Okay. Thank you. I'm guessing you might be the resident of Crowhurst.
440 Resolution Way.
Hi. Oh, Resolution Way? That's the next item on our agenda. So, hang tough, we'll get you. Yeah. Yeah. No. I wasn't sure if you wanted to comment on this particular item. I wasn't sure which item you were associated with. But you're welcome to comment on this one too. Okay, sounds good. Committee, comments, thoughts? Greg.
Madam Chair, I guess, Michael, did you say that it's not typical for the city, unless the trees are diseased, to trim them? And
That's
those trees are on our property?
Yeah.
And if those trees were on private property, and is it up to the neighbors to come to I'm not familiar with what the sort of courtesy is on that, or how it works, having never owned a house with a view.
The only instance I'm aware of where the city would be involved in trees, stopping tree cutting on private property, is if it's a development permit area for environmental reasons. Then the property owner would have to get a development permit before removing any healthy trees, and there may be some limits on how much they have to be removing, but I'm not aware of the details. Otherwise, there is nothing to stop a property owner deciding to cut down their trees.
So I'm not clear on the developer that you mentioned.
The developer.
The developer who you said that if that development occurs, it may be moot because those trees are coming down anyway. But is it on city property or is it on private property?
Well, they will be doing work on city property to provide sidewalks, etc. And we're just not sure at this moment whether
Oh, I see.
that would have an effect on this.
Okay, so that would be right along.
It's up against the Ocean Grove development.
Yeah, I drive by it every day. And so if they want to continue on with their development down there, then there may be a possibility. But that slope is quite steep there, isn't it?
It is, but I know that they are considering bringing a walkway up to that corner from their development. And so there may be changes happening there that are difficult to predict right now.
And so I take it the residents don't just see the trees as being a view, because they're very nice trees. But so those trees may have to come down if the developer was then going to put in a public amenity such as.
It's possible. It's possible. We don't know yet.
Tricky. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Gib?
One concern that I have here is that these trees were previously cut by somebody without asking permission from the city. And now we have somebody who does the right thing and comes forward and asks permission and gets told no. And if that's the position that we take, it reinforces the idea that it's easier to ask forgiveness than it is to ask for permission. And it's not necessarily something that, I think we want to encourage in the area. I recognize the fact that we want to try and keep as much vegetation as possible in their natural state and that it's normally not our policy. But in a situation like this where a lot of the houses are in fact built specifically to take in the views that are there, and the process of topping some of the trees to maintain a view was already done once, is it something that we want to prohibit just because we don't normally do it?
Could
Or
I make an opinion in response to that?
Highly irregular.
I think Gib has just put for an excellent argument for the abolition of all laws. And I will tomorrow be phoning the RCMP to ask permission to speed, because everybody else does it without asking permission. So if I ask permission, then surely they'll say yes.
Okay, I think that got us on topic, off topic. Gib?
no, that's fine. That was one of my points, and the other one was, is this something that we want to stick to our guns just because it's something that we don't normally do in a situation like this? How harmful is it to allow the trees at someone else's cost to be trimmed for the purpose of keeping a view?
Well, it's interesting because I believe the city of Colwood had a motto at one time, the city of trees, and then a certain CAO changed it to the city of views. But I'm not sure that that was sanctioned by council. So it does depend on whether the trees are more important than views, and that's entirely a political decision, not a staff decision.
Let me break and go back to the public. Mr. Public, would you like to speak on this issue?
I just have one clarification question too, and it's just regarding the actual location of it. Because my understanding is anytime I've wanted to cut a tree in the lagoon area, I've had to get a special permit because there's a special classification as the lagoon area. So I'm just curious if that falls within that lagoon area. So if
Yeah, it's a development permit area, and I would imagine this is in that development permit area. But I'm
Good
not
point.
absolutely sure of the dimensions.
So this, sorry, and this just as clarification, so this development permit area is different than, say, something on Latoria? Like if somebody wanted to cut a tree and they live on Latoria, could they just cut a tree in Latoria?
There are,
Compared to what this lagoon area?
well, let me draw a comparison that I know is for sure. There are development permit areas in our town center that are completely different from the development permit areas in the lagoon. The one is focused on the form and character of development, the other is focused on environmental.
But Michael, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, that if I'm a private homeowner in the lagoon area, I don't necessarily need a permit to cut a tree on my own property.
If you're in a development permit area, you need
do?
a development permit.
So it's not just applying to the developers.
No.
Yeah, sorry. Because I know I'm in this situation right now that on my property line, there's a tree that my neighbors want to cut down, and a new person's bought the house beside me, so they've said that they'll pay for it, but I sent them to the city that they needed to get a permit to get that tree down, and I said, I don't know if you're going to get a permit because that's a healthy tree. So.
Well, interesting. All right. So, winding our way back to this one. Gordy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I'm a wee bit uncomfortable with this, thinking back to our issues on Carger Terrace, and what happened to those trees up there when someone decided that they didn't think trees should grow, and took it upon themselves to top them off, and it created the city no end of grief. Just recently popped up, but it was a big issue about 13 years ago as well. I guess it's a bit of a slippery slope. I mean, when you buy a house there, you think of, well, there's trees, of course, they're going to grow. And so, your view is going to be somewhat impacted, and one should think about that when they're purchasing. But also, I wonder where it stops, because I'm looking down Lagoon Road, and I'm thinking, holy smokes, if I cut all these trees down, my view opens up tenfold, so we might be talking 1 or 2 or 3 trees, but, I can see the whole Lagoon Road being topped eventually. If people think, you know what, they can get away with it, I would like to increase my view as well. And, I'm not sure that that's necessarily to the city's benefit, by lopping trees, and it doesn't know. I think we've seen arborist reports in the past that said, really, it's not ideal for the tree. It doesn't make it healthier. If anything, we should be maybe selective, taking spiral pruning more than anything. But lobbing off the top of the tree, just isn't healthy, and it may make it unsafe. Some respects. So, I'm not in favor of allowing them to top it, and more in favor of probably seeing where Ocean Grove goes. And I think that's probably going to happen in the next couple of years, anyways, if not sooner. So, I'm not in favor of this one. Thanks.
I did take the opportunity to go down and take a look at the trees and from the property, and I noted that the property has actually a very large hedge in front of it, which has got to be blocking some of their views. And then when you look at the trees themselves, there is a glorious irony, because they've very clearly been topped, and as a result of it, they've all bushed out. So if they'd been left and sort of, spiral pruned or just left, they probably would still have the views through them. But because they were topped before it's not that the trees are sort of a particularly wonderful specimen. There's a kind of quite an interesting mess in there, but I would think also from that property owner's point of view, given that there's likely to be a fair bit of building over the next little while, my guess is they might actually welcome those trees in terms of a bit of a buffer for noise and dust and everything else that's going on. And I think we do need to stick to our principles that we don't top trees purely for the purpose of creating views, because I think that's a very slippery slope in this town. And I also note that particular property owner has planted a number of trees on their property that, when they grow up, will block their neighbours' views. So that's going to be an interesting conversation too. So for myself, I'm supportive of the staff recommendation to deny the request. But I am looking for more discussion, a motion.
May I suggest something, given what you've just said about the spiral pruning versus topping? Would the committee be interested in offering an alternative to the homeowner to have those trees spiral pruned? Not for safety in this case, but to reduce the bulk. And I don't know whether that might encourage the tree to grow up and be further spiral pruned and end up with a partial view through the tree.
Having looked at those trees, I think they're in not particularly brilliant shape in any case. And I think, those who have said the development of Ocean Grove might, and what, whether it's sidewalks or whatever goes in there, I suspect it's probably not worth the effort to do anything, but...
Well, I know we don't set precedents, courts set precedents. I would suggest that we hold the line on this one, because trees grow. They're fir trees, for God's sakes. They're going to grow. If you looked across the street when you bought the house, you know that in a few years they're going to grow up. And we also have the fact that those trees may be taken for other reasons, and so in this case, the homeowner will ultimately be satisfied. But for other cases that will come before us inevitably as people build up the sides of mountains looking for better views, I think this will come before us frequently. And I would like to say that unless there's a safety issue or a imminent risk, I would say don't, because would we have to bear the cost of the spiral pruning if that was even possible in this case, or would the homeowner?
That wouldn't be my intent. I assume the homeowner would bear the cost, but I agree. Since the position may be resolved by other means, the spiral pruning would be an expensive waste at this point. Yeah.
Yes, I'm comfortable with the recommendation.
Okay. Are you moving it?
Unless there's any other discussion, I'll move the motion to deny the applicant's request for topping those trees as laid out by the staff recommendation.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favour? Opposed? One opposed? Gibb was opposed? Okay. Thank you, folks. Next one, item 4.3, request to allow the landscape rock structure to remain on city property at 3440 Resolution Way. Michael, did you get this one too?
Yep. So
Fire
I
away.
think this one's a really interesting one. It's an attractive structure. It's the sort of thing that developers often put at the entrance to a development. But obviously, if the municipality, wanted to dig something up that was under or nearby, could be a problem. And this would be an interesting one to apply the same thought about the bylaw. If we're going to allow this now, do we then allow it in the bylaw and allow them all the way along? Or do we insist that they're on private property? And looking at the photographs, there doesn't seem to be any reason why this couldn't have been on private property.
Yep. Thank you. I'm thinking you're the resident at the... Okay.
When it all went down, I wasn't there, and someone had said to contact the municipality, and they were misled with misunderstanding. There was a landscape structure that maintained the boulevard. So I knew there would have been an issue, but what happens, it got built, and then once it was built, and talked to engineering, and it became a problem. So I guess basically here tonight to see if we can go along with what last gentleman went through there with I mean, you pave the driveway, right? The concrete, when you build a house, you're going to, municipality owns that part of the driveway to pour concrete. I was driving through Langford last night up to Bear Mountain, and they have those electrical things on the side of the road. They've got, seems to be rock structures to protect someone driving into them, into those electrical boxes. I mean, if it ever had to be moved, I guess it could be moved. It's there now. You guys decide.
Are you able to tell us, first of all, how easy or difficult it would be to move it?
I mean, if you wanted to get rid of it, the municipality had to dig it up for some reason, you could take the backhoe and just flip it over. Simple as that. But if you wanted to move it in one piece, you have to dig underneath it, and then you have to crane it up and lift it.
Okay. And are you aware of any services that currently run across that front piece?
There's a hydro and Telus box right behind it, and there's an electrical box inside it.
Okay.
But I mean, it has the boulevard there has like a sort of a bulging boulevard. So I mean, I know it should be on the property, but the setbacks I think are a little bit ridiculous because they haven't. The setback from the road is 25, 30, 50 feet or something like that. Should be less. It should be.
Yeah.
I mean, you could get rid of it very easily.
Okay. Committee. Questions? Questions for the applicant? Gib?
Not so much a question for the applicant. I tend to agree with the applicant that this would fall under much the same as the fake grass. You know, where if they're willing to enter into an agreement that should it need to be dug up, that the city would be willing to just put grass back, but it would be up to the homeowner at the time if they want to go to the expense of putting, you know, the rock structure with the address back up. That protects the city so that we're not, you know, suddenly having to be careful where we dig because it's going to cost us more here than there. And it would allow, you know, situations like this for somebody who's invested some money into something that I think is a beautification for one of the streets in the municipality, to allow it to remain there.
Thank you. Gordy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I like the green lawn, by the way. Looks very
Well sprinkled,
yeah, well
obviously.
sprinkled.
Yeah.
I had a walk up there on the weekend, and I have to agree, it does look attractive, and you know, I guess you have to. I appreciate the predicament that staff are in, you know, having to live by the bylaw. So, you know, I appreciate the recommendation and the need for the recommendation. And there's probably a little less flexibility allowed, you know, within the bylaw from a staff point of view. So I get that. But I think there has to be a bit of reasonableness, I think, in this, when you're looking at the location and it's in the bulb, and you know, there's an inherent risk, I guess, on a homeowner if there has to be work done and there's a service running underneath it. It's toast, you know, and that's just life. And so, you know, I don't view this any different than perhaps some homeowners putting huge boulders right up at road edge so people won't park on their grass.
Yeah.
You know, it's a structure as well, and we kind of just, you know, whatever until it becomes a problem. So, yeah, you know, I think, again, this is attractive, and boy, in a new subdivision, I sure as hell hope that there isn't any work that needs to happen underneath it immediately anyways, knock on wood, and you know, I'm in favor of it remaining. Thank you.
Is it, Madam Chair, through you to the applicant, is it lit? Is it backlit, or?
Well, I plumbed it so you could put power on it.
So that's also a safety issue, because then the fire department have no trouble finding that place. They would want that everywhere. So, and it does just mark the one address, right? Yeah. I actually put a rock in front of my house, but it's on my own property with my address on it, and I like the idea, and I think it looks good. And if we can come up with the same solution, could we do the same thing as we did with the grass, have a covenant and be amenable to that?
Yeah, I think the encroachment agreement works fine.
Okay.
So, I mean, I think that creates a sort of fairly simple option for you. If you decide you don't want to pay the $500 encroachment agreement, then your choice is to move it. But that's a way of, you know, it is, I agree, it's a nice looking structure. That would be a way of protecting the city, making sure that work can get done if it needs to.
Price
And then
of the
that
house just
will-
went up $500.
Yeah.
Or it might be less, depending on the lawyer.
Depends how much your lawyer likes you.
In that business, so they better like us.
So I'd be happy to make that recommendation.
Use my letter to put the covenant on it, on the property?
Yeah, we would give you the document. The document's all been vetted through our lawyers, but your lawyer would just have to do the registration. Now, you may actually be able to get somebody of a lower qualification than a lawyer to register it. I'm not sure.
A notary?
Notary public may be able to do it for you. It's worth a try. Yeah.
I would have, when I got there and it was on the wrong spot, I got trouble with that. That's more than the phone municipality and said, considering if it's beautiful, it's a location, and misled, and I was like, okay, we'll let it roll. And
Yeah.
sure enough, I went trying to get $1,000 back for deposit for.
Yeah. I mean, as Councillor Logan says, I mean, staff have to follow. This is what our books say. So this is the recommendation that they have to put. Okay, all right.
They'll never miss a pizza either.
Yeah, that's good.
Pizza will always make it.
Okay. Greg, you have a recommendation?
I would recommend that the same as we did for the previous, with the turf, whatever the wording was for that. I think, Gib, that was your wording, wasn't it?
Approve the request to
approve
allow
the request.
the rock structure to remain
Subject to an encroachment agreement.
Okay.
All right.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favour? That one was carried. So that goes to. So you heard me say that goes to council on Monday. Oh. Yeah. So no, council is on Monday. So that recommendation will go to council on Monday. Thank you. Take care. Okay. Moving right along. Emmett, you get this one. Report Deputy City Engineer, Kelly Road Project Update.
Oh, yes. This will be a short one.
I gather it was a great party at Home Williams Park. Gordy was writing rave emails.
Excellent event. It really was. Our communications manager had this brilliant idea to have it outdoor in the park, and it was a wonderful event in that a lot of the neighbors that were there were saying, you know, yeah, I've lived next to you forever, and I've never met you. It was
brilliant.
Oh, wow.
So it was kind of interesting, just that kind of place-making thing.
Exactly.
At any rate,
My apologies for not making it.
the original intent of this project, as you know, is to beautify a section of Kelly Road, add in some bike lanes and some sidewalks. And as we consulted the other master plans and talked with some of the people about the scope of the project and where it was at, in consulting the economic development plan, transportation plan, and the sewer master plan, it became really apparent that from an economic development perspective, that the sewers should probably go in before this project gets built. But we didn't have a mandate to do that, and so what we did is we brought the project to a transportation and public infrastructure meeting, and a lot of the public came out to that meeting, and they were here for other reasons as well. They were here for some other development-related reasons, but people spoke, gave us some input into the plans, and expressed the need for more discussion around things like the on-street parking. Some people had some concerns about that, specifically some business owners and some residents. One resident spoke very passionately about the need for it to be the entire length of Kelly Road, specifically that the area beyond Pickford wanted to make sure that was included and not just left alone, that it would never happen. Whether the sewer line should be installed along with the road improvements, there was a lot of talk about that, and that seemed to be a fairly strong feeling that should happen in that meeting. Ensuring the safety and accessibility at the bus stops, the park entrances, concerns about the impact of the potential road redirection, that involves the 80 closure that we were discussing at that point. And then ensuring that all the members of the community were informed and had the opportunity to provide input. And so given that, and we had already kind of planned to do this, but we moved ahead with the public open house that I spoke about, and Sandra's great suggestion that we have it outdoor in the park, and the weather blessed us with a little bit of a windstorm, which kind of made it interesting. But we managed to get the, I guess, 30-odd display boards wedged into the fence and functional. And so what happened there, prior to that meeting, so that we had good information out, we sent out about 800 mailers to the surrounding area. And we had about 75 people respond and attend the meeting, which represented, I think, it was over 55 families completed questionnaires on the project. And some of the high points of that, the questionnaires are actually included in the report for the detailed responses. But there was broad support for installing sewers as a part of the project. Over 75% of the respondents agreed or strongly agreed with this approach. Walking, cycling, and transit were seen as important objectives. On-street parking was also considered important, and we had the transportation consultant that had done the concept drawings there, and he was engaging with the public on the issues of the parking and how to make that work as well. The opinions of redirecting the traffic at the intersection of Kelly and 80, it was kind of an even split. There were some people that were very, very much opposed to it, and some people that were actually a few people that were very much opposed to it, one in particular. And then there were some people that were in favor of it, and it was a pretty even split. Again, the questionnaire results are included as an Appendix A to this report. Again, the meeting also resulted in more than 30 new signups to the Colwood email updates, which is always a good thing. Gets more information out there. So we've developed some options on this, and we don't have the costing for the options. You'll see this in the recommendation later. So the options for the sewer are to not install the sewers in advance of the transportation project, but just wait for the development to fund the sewer improvements. And the advantage of this approach is that the developer pays for the cost of the sewers, and we don't have to do any of the upfront cost. The disadvantage is the road will be dug up in the near future as sections of development evolve. It probably restricts the development of the area nearest the current sewer. Sorry, where does it say that? Yeah, it probably initially restricts development to the areas nearest to this current sewer pipeline and the sewer main on Souk Road, which is active right now. And it's just the proposed sewer main goes a very short distance down Kelly Road before a new one picks it up and takes it in the other direction. And so it'd be very difficult to lay that sewer main without going for the full pump station, but I'll get to that in a second. So this would also be seen as a disincentive to development, and it's contrary to the city's economic development objectives. So I think if we don't put the sewer line in, then we're sort of sending a message that, or it could be seen that we're sending a message that economic development isn't really that big of a concern for us, or it could be interpreted that way. So the other second option is to install the sewer mains and the manholes in the road, just the sewer mains and the manholes as per the sewer master plan, and leave them capped until development proceeds. The advantage of this option is that the road would not be dug up for sewer installation in the near future. It would probably save some money, overall money. The disadvantage is it still costs us up front, so it saves the developer money, but it still costs us. Another advantage of it, of course, is it still provides some incentive for development, but they're not active sewer lines at this point. They're not functional. They're just there to be hooked up later. Again, this would be contrary to the city's economic development objectives. The third option is that we have is to install the sewer mains and the manholes and the lift station as per the sewer master plan, with an additional force main in the same trench to drain the system into the Souk Road main. So you'll recall from the last meeting, or you may recall from the last meeting, that just a very short section of it currently drains towards Souk Road in the plan, and the rest of it would drain farther down to the Colwood border, Colwood boundary with Langford, and then go into a force main system, which would be tremendously expensive to build out. So the idea was to put the entire sewer system in for that ultimate build out, but at the far end just hook up a force main that comes right down the same trench and drains into the sewer line on Souk Road. So it's somewhat cost effective in that regard. This would also negate the need to dig up the road. Connections could be made to the surrounding neighborhoods as development proceeds. This would support the city's economic development objectives, and as a result of the questionnaire shows, there seems to be a broad support for this approach. The disadvantage is that city is responsible for most of the cost of this installation, and it represents a departure from the past, and that Colwood has not built sewer infrastructure in advance of and without funding from the development of previous years. And when I get to funding, we'll talk a little bit more about that as well, because there may be some impediment to that. So for the transportation options, basically it boils down to, for Kelly Road itself, either construct it in sections, as we have the current budget to do one section that we think we could do for this amount of money. Block by block, beginning with a section from Souk Road to 80, then from 80 to Pickford, and then from Pickford to the Colwood boundary. And this could occur as the budget becomes available a year at a time. The advantages of this approach are the priority of this project can be evaluated against other projects and the next council's projects year by year, and there will be no commitments against the future budget years. The disadvantage is that the overall project will most likely take 4 years of construction to complete. There will be additional mobilization costs which will incrementally add to the cost of the project. And it'll take at least 4 years, assuming that there's no interruptions in the funding from year to year, assuming that no other priority comes and bumps the project. The other option is to construct Kelly Road as one complete project from Souk Road to the Colwood boundary. The advantage of this approach is that there would be only approximately 1 year of construction for all of the transportation improvements, and if we did the sewer, that would fall into the same year. That would all be done under the 1 year once we started it. The disadvantage is that borrowing against some of the city's future gas tax would be required, which may limit the city's options for other improvements. And what we have, as you'll see later, is that there's a commitment from the federal government to give us, on average, around $700,000 per year for the next 5 years, which is $3.5 million. And we have some other, obviously, serious projects, including sewage treatment, that we need to consider. And that's just scratching the surface. I'm sure there are others as well that will want that funding. But that's talking about the funding. We'll go back to transportation on Metchosin and 80 Greenway. That concept, which is recommended in the transportation plan, and is a very important cycling link when you consider the development that will happen through Royal Bay and will happen through other areas of Colwyn and Langford, and the amount of congestion that's going to go on the road. We're going to need some viable cycling links that are dedicated, solid cycling links to make that a safe alternative to get through to out of Colwood and into the other areas of the western communities in downtown. And of course, cycling and transit will be some of those. So option 1 is to close 80 Road at Kelly Road. And just do a little green there as we showed last time, and show just a little area that allows pedestrians and cyclists and emergency vehicles to get through, but is closed to vehicular traffic. The advantage of this approach is the reduction in traffic along 80 Road, and the disadvantage of this approach is the inconvenience to vehicular traffic that will occur in the 80 Road area, and in particular the residents of Evans Drive. Excuse me, I don't want to underestimate that inconvenience. Option 2 is to restrict the width of the vehicle lanes on 80 and Metchosin Road at the Kelly Road intersection. And we've learned something about this, because the similar approach that we did on Ackland, where the residents were initially pretty upset about it, it actually works pretty well. And I don't want to sort of predispose where we're going to go with that, but I suspect that the next meeting is not going to have a very big turnout because it's working really well. So that's still under evaluation, though, and we will bring a report to TNPI after an October site meeting with the residents at the Ackland Road intersection. The advantage of this approach would be the preservation of the vehicle connection to the neighborhoods while still reducing the speed at which vehicles enter the greenway. A third option, an additional option, is to install a traffic circle at the intersection of 80 and Mount View. And I don't mean a big roundabout. I just mean a small traffic circle that does some traffic calming. You have to, the advantage of that, of course, is the reduction of the speed along Mount View and along 80. But we really need to design that carefully, because we know we've seen them done very well in Portland. We've seen them done well in Saanich. We've seen them done well in Seattle. We've seen them done not so well in Saanich. When I lived in the Gorge area of Saanich, they installed the traffic circles, and then they came along and modified them, and it took about 4 iterations to get it right. And so we need to make sure that we learn what we can from our neighbors on that if we go in that direction. The disadvantage of that approach, of course, is the additional cost, which may or may not be a significant cost. We could also install a 4-way stop at 80 and Mount View to slow the traffic on Mount View. The advantage of this approach is it's fairly inexpensive to implement. The disadvantage is that drivers just have shown a tendency to just ignore that stop, particularly for the traffic that hasn't had a stop sign in the past, and all of a sudden you put up a 4-way stop, and a lot of people just ignore it. The fifth option is to take the intersection of Metchosin and Souk Road, that very busy intersection that you used to get here, and take the additional leg that goes down the quiet part of Metchosin Road, and redesign that pedestrian and cycling connector to make it a better connector, and make it more cycling friendly through the intersection, and also make it an emergency vehicle access. We feel that would not be a significant cost in the scheme of things, but that estimate would come out as a part of what we're going to propose. So, by the way, the fire department loves that, of course, because they get into that neighborhood a whole lot easier than they have to now. They have to go all the way around. So the financial considerations, again, this started off as a beautification project and some bike lanes and so on and so forth. We currently have funding in the amount of $710,000 plus an additional $75,000 that we applied for and received through the CRD, which also originates in federal gas tax. And this amount is sufficient to complete the transportation improvements from Souk to 80 Road.
I don't think it was anything you said.
I'm hoping it was. That's okay. Additional sections of the road and the sewer infrastructure would require additional funding. So all of the options, including the sewer options, may be eligible to be funded from the gas tax, but the gas tax is limited. Again, as I said, it's $700,000. So there's, in addition to the $710,000 that we have now, there's up to $3.5 million. We should probably just cut that right in half right off the bat and say we need to reserve at least that much for the potential of sewage treatment and other things, I would think, just to, as sort of thinking out as possibilities in the future. But again, these decisions would be made later. Other funding options include grants, which we would have to wait for, delaying the work, but that's not necessarily a problem either. Developer contributions, which would only occur if there were rezonings in the area, and also taxation. Development cost charges are also an option for the transportation improvements, because and we've had this argument in a past municipality that I worked in, and we determined that because we're talking about increases in capacity for the road, then it is something that could be eligible for DCCs if you include it in the DCC bylaw rewrite. The increase in capacity doesn't just have to be vehicles. Once you've increased cycling or you increase pedestrian, you're increasing capacity for development, and it's a workable argument, so it works out quite well. So, so let's see, where am I at in this whole thing? So the provision of, sorry, where am I at here? The sewer options are, right. Providing that the DCC bylaw is rewritten to include this project. And given that we plan to rewrite it after the transportation master plan because we're going to have a completely new slate of projects that need to be built out, the timing could work really well for this. So the sewer construction is a real problem to fund. That's the issue, because the grants for simply extending the sewer lines are rare, because it's rarely an issue for most municipalities. DCCs cannot be used due to previous issues with the sewer system's troubled legal past. So, did you want to discuss? Do you want to reference that at all?
No, I can do if the committee wants me to, but it, might take us back.
I think
Yeah.
Please not down
Okay.
that rabbit hole.
But we'll just
No.
yeah, we'll move it forward. So again, constructing the new sewers from taxes with no cost to the benefiting property owners could be seen as unfair. However, promoting economic development and commercial development on parts of Kelly Road would probably be a benefit to the whole community, and building these sewers is likely to be an important part in promoting that. Before committee can make a decision on constructing sewers, we need to develop the estimates and investigate the possible funding sources for all of the above options in sewers and on the transportation side. So we need to develop those estimates, and this will require outside assistance, as the city has not done much in the way of the sewer work, certainly over a decade, whereas local consultants have a lot more experience in this. I should point out that the sewers could probably be funded from the gas tax, but we would have to investigate that as well. So that would be one way that we could get around it. There's a whole mix in the funding that you can see the potential for grants, and we know that there's a grant window open right now that has a fair amount of money in it, and we're thinking about what we're going to do to go after that, so that could happen fairly quickly. So the recommendation is that staff spend up to $10,000 from the current budget for Kelly Road to obtain consultant help to ensure that good cost estimates for the proposed sewer construction are acquired, and that we bring this back to the committee with options for funding and recommendations for proceeding. As far as the transportation, we feel that we can, I would also like to add that we spend up to $5,000 to make sure that we get the transportation ones tight as well. So change that if we could to change the recommendation up to $15,000 out of the current budget to make sure that we get the tight estimates that we need to move forward.
And Emmett, when you say current budget, are you talking current city budget, gas tax? In other words, where is that?
The current Kelly Road budget.
The current Kerry,
710.
which
710.
comes from gas tax.
Yes.
Okay.
It makes sense that that we spend the money from this budget because this is part of building this project.
Okay, and that's an eligible gas tax
Yeah.
expenditure. Great. Okay. Committee. That was not easy to digest, Emmett. There's a lot of stuff in that.
It was excellent. It was, may I?
Yeah, absolutely.
I just saw here that somebody wanted to see arbutus trees on the public area, and I'd have to argue with them on that because somebody'd have to clean it up. But other than that, great report. And I don't see how we could possibly go forward without putting in the necessary infrastructure because everything else is great. And every time I drive down Kelly Road, I get as excited as Gord did about flowers on the entrance to the city. I love the concept of what we're talking about. I know that the guy with the motorhome is resisting it for parking. I know that everybody has their own idea, and I know that people have a difficult time looking 15 years into the future. But I don't believe any of it is possible until we get the stuff below ground that's not sexy, it's nothing, it's not fun, it's not cool. But if we don't do it, we can't have anything else. And I think that development in 20 years from now will be a key link. I have an idea. It probably won't look anything like I anticipate it would, but I really think that the getting it right, what goes beneath the ground, is the most important part. So I'm a big fan of that, and there is a lot of detail in here. And I know you just wrote it this afternoon, but it's really a lot to digest. You're absolutely right. But I'm a big fan of getting that $10,000 or $15,000 spent out of the 710, if it is out of the gas tax, and taking it and making sure we do it right the first time. Because if we start tearing that road up in sections, and then another year we tear it up the next summer and the next summer, all those people trying to get to Walmart the day before school are going to have our throats, or have our necks or heads or whatever. But I would say that do it all at once, but let's just make sure we get it right. And I think that investment of that $15,000 would be the way to go.
May I say something? Just, before I forget, we have already spent some money on this in the concept design, just so you know. And so this is in addition to that. We just as part of building the project, we start with the concept design and we go from there. So I didn't want it to go into the minutes that we get author. No, that's good. No, I do want that in. No, I do want that in. I actually want that in the minutes. That we have already spent some money on concept designs because I was afraid that by asking for $15,000. Later on, it's going to, you'll see, well, wait a minute, you've already spent $8,000 on this or whatever it is. And so I just want to make sure that's in the minutes. Thank you.
Open and transparent. Okay.
That's all I have.
Thank you. Gordy, I could see you just waiting to jump in there.
Yeah, totally. Well, I do have to really commend staff for that phenomenal open house. I mean, it was really buzzing around there. It's really quite exciting, and I thought it's quite a template for other stuff in the future. So it's like, cool, awesome, and it generated a lot of interest in the hood. So I'm in favor of spending the money as well. I'm a little curious. The $5,000 is to tighten up the cost estimates. I mean, wouldn't we get somewhat reliable cost estimates for the $10,000?
Well, we would. The 10,000 was specifically for the sewer.
Oh,
And
just
so,
for the sewers.
Yeah, that was for the sewer. And so for the 5,000, what I wanted to do is get some tight cost estimates on all of these other transportation options that we're looking at.
Oh,
Because
okay.
once we bring that to you, we want to put a price tag on them that's a real good price tag. We don't want to be just kind of having a guess. We've done that once before.
Yeah,
And we learned.
my apologies. Yeah.
So that's for the roundabouts
But
and-
I didn't realize it was,
Yeah,
it was
for-
narrow.
Sorry.
So like my friend here, I'm eager to actually get the whole thing done at the same time as well, because there's some economies of scale as well by having crews in there just banging off, and so it'd be nice to get some creative solutions to be able to move that along. And I guess we have to make up our mind how we want to see Kelly Road look, and if it's a priority. Much like, and I hate to say it, much like Langford did with Pete Road. You know, they said, this is what we want for Pete Road, we're going to rezone it, and this is the type of corridor we want to see, and it's evolving. And so I think in terms of sewer, I guess there's a couple of options. We have to spend a little bit to perhaps benefit a little bit, because there's several large properties along Kelly Road that could easily add a fair bit of density along that corridor. And we've already had people come and say to us, you know, you run sewers down there, you know, we're in like hotcakes. So I'm wondering, because the sewer seems to be the big thing, is there an option to do like a local area service as an example? Because people say, we want the sewers. And I mean,
Well,
yeah,
actually-
we might have to borrow, but at least we're getting people to hook up and pay for it back.
I think because there's a pump station involved, if you just did straight local area service, no support from taxes, it would be too rich for people's blood. However, given that I think a lot of them are eyeing selling their properties for development, if we could keep it down a bit by putting in partial taxes and the rest comes from the local area service, I think we might be able to find a balance there where the residents are prepared to put in a portion, and we keep the amount that has to come from the taxpayer or from grants down, and maybe we can have a win-win there.
Hybrid.
Yeah, and I think it can be done, and there's some justification for making sure that these residents pay something, because everybody else on sewer is paying something. But limiting it to, say, $300 a year or maybe $800 a year max would, be in line with what other people are paying elsewhere. Some people are only paying $100 a year. So somewhere in that area, we would be saying, okay, this is normal. They're paying a normal amount. And the taxpayers are kicking in the rest because of the pump station, which is abnormal for that small number of properties. So I would say we get the cost estimates and then we explore exactly that.
Yeah, I mean, we have an interim director of finance there that might have
Yeah.
some very creative ideas to fund this as well.
Good.
You know, so I think that's a great plan, quite frankly. And so that's great. So let's see where the cost estimates bring us, and then get those creative juices flowing. I think it's exciting.
Okay, I'm going to pass to Gibb and then back to you, Emmett. Okay.
Great.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If you build it, they will come. If we're doing a project here, I think we need to take a look at everything we can put into the ground before we put the finishing on. Is going to save us not only money, but I think it's going to save us reputation in the future for being forward-thinking and making sure we do things the way we need to do it. And the same goes with doing Kelly Road in portions, one block at a time. If you want people to be encouraged to come back and use Kelly Road, especially as businesses hopefully are going to increase going on there, you want it done all at once. If it takes 4 years, you're going to discourage people so much that they're just going to get frustrated and not be happy with it at all. So, I'm in favor of going forward with it, albeit we need to get some stronger numbers before we can start making decisions on specifically what we're doing. But I like the idea of finding out better options for costing some of these things.
Okay, thanks. Emmett?
One of the other options that we have is as we move this forward, we do have money in the budget right now. As we get the prices in, we could make the call that, or council could make the call that, let's just go ahead and do the sewers and get that part of it started right now with the additional funding now. And that they could actually at the same time make the decision to borrow against gas tax and build the whole project. But we'll have to develop those funding sources as we go. I think the way this would play out is that we would We would decide how much of the project we want to build, how much council wants to build. And we would go out and we would get this designed. And we would get the complete design done. And then there's another thing that's going to come to you in a future meeting about how we design projects in general, and we would apply it to this one as well, is that once we have the design in place, and even as we're conceptualizing the project right now, we already know when we would like to build it. If we got the go-ahead to go and say, go ahead and build it, there are specific factors that limit when we can or should and shouldn't build certain things. And the freezing weather is one. We don't want to be pouring sidewalks anytime from November 1st through to the end of February. And so if you look at that, that means that we're not going to do it this year. There's no way we're going to get it done this year. And so we would be looking at next year, but I don't think that we would be in a position of getting it started in January, February, March, because it's a year's project. So we would want to start it probably somewhere around July, so that we finish it somewhere around July, and we're finishing it in the summer, or getting it finished in the spring, early summer, where we can do the concrete work and the plantings and finish it right away and not have it hanging around for a year until we hit the right time to do the planting. So we would work it backwards from that point. The advantage of that is that the way I had it calculated out, it gives us around 4 or 5 months of having the design complete and starting construction. And that's perfect grant time. That's when you actually have a shovel-ready project that's right there, and you're able to go and take advantage of those grants that say you have to have the engineering done, and we have it done. So that's another option.
Greg?
Is it going to be public works staff doing the work?
No.
Oh, so
No,
it's all, what about the sidewalks and stuff after they experience?
I think, they've done a really nice job on this one. Absolutely, they've done a great job.
Finished
on
job
this.
looks awesome.
But we're talking about a big project here. We're talking about getting it done a year. Yeah, it's a large project. We just don't have the staff, and we wouldn't want to staff up for that and then lay them off. For the Machosen 80 Greenway, certainly I think the Machosen and Souk intersection and the modifications to that's perfect for public works. The traffic circle, I think it would be great to get them to do that because of the learning that we would do around that. We've got it figured out with them on how the budgeting control happens, and so we're getting pretty tight around that. But I think we want to keep their projects kind of small into that point.
Okay.
They have
So-
to have time to do the maintenance as well.
Yeah.
I guess they got a job to do as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So would part of the consultant then be to get tenders or would that be, how would we,
I think we
how
would
would that process look in terms of the timeline?
In terms of the timeline, I think we would, as far as this money goes, this would just be to get the estimate done for what it would cost to design this project and build this project. We wouldn't be doing any of the tendering out of this $10,000 or $15,000. But as far as the major design, when we went forward to the major design, yeah, we could go that route. We could have the consultant take care of the tendering process for us if we wanted to.
Yeah.
Or we could do it ourselves.
We got a lot of other things to do.
That's true.
So, echoing everything that committee has already said, it makes, we need to treat this as an economic development project. I think there's a lot of sense in focusing effort in one and funding in one specific area, do a whole bunch of stuff that kind of creates this development node, and there seems to be a lot of concurrence that that's a good place to do it for all kinds of reasons. Yes, we need to do everything all at once. And I think Gib raised a good point. Do everything, get the underground. Have we thought about doing the fiber optic, for example, at the same time?
Yes.
Let's kind of look at. You guys obviously had that conversation already.
I'd like to jump in on that if I could, because this meeting's not going to last long enough as it is.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Conversation with BC Hydro. They really want to put some of they have two projects they need to power right now.
Yeah.
I did not want to put this in the report because I don't want to be committed to it. There are two projects they want to power right now, Royal Bay, and they need to put major infrastructure down there, and Capital City Centre. And they need to go down Kelly Road and they need to go up and over the hill. And on Kelly Road, they asked if they could put further wires up over top of the initial ones, and I said, absolutely not. If you put those underground, then we might, our committee and our council might waive some of the requirement for going underground on VMP, which is in doing it in rock. So we might actually get a freebie on that. It wouldn't be a freebie, but if we could underground the power on Kelly Road, that takes us to a whole new level.
Yeah,
All of a sudden, it's not welcome to Colwood.
That
Well,
would
it
be
is. But it's
awesome.
welcome to the Uplands sort of idea of
Yeah.
Colwood instead of, right, it's completely new.
That'd be
Colwood.
huge if we can swing that deal.
We'll see what we can do on that.
Do you have a sense of if we were to put in a sewer tomorrow, do we have a sense that there might be 20 houses hooking up, 100 houses hooking up?
66%
Would be in favor.
Yeah. that doesn't
There's
Yeah.
some information in here on people that live right on Kelly Road, and I think there were 15 that said we'll hook up right now.
Right.
So that information is in here.
But, and the specific number is not so important, but, you know, we've got a relatively small number now, and potentially 20 years from now, when all's said and done, we could have several hundred hookups.
Yeah, definitely.
So one of the things I would love for you to explore with our creative director of finance is some kind of sort of balloon financing where we, you know, it all eventually comes out of those homeowners, but you know if we sort of take out a debt that's this much, we pay a little bit per year for the first few years, and then that ramps up as more people join the system. So what the city's contributing is essentially the sort of free borrowing, if you like, over a period of time, or maybe it's not free, but we do it in such a way that, you know, ultimately it is the people who live there who are paying for it, but you don't get into this, the people who are living there now are paying for something that's a future benefit. There might be other ways of doing it as well. I'd love the Director of Finance to look at it. Michael?
That's my fault. I introduced you to the idea of balloon
Yes, it is.
financing, and you're running with
It's a
it.
good idea.
But the
You're
reason
going to tell me what's wrong.
the reason why it works with the sewage treatment project is that it would be a design build finance project. So it's not us financing it. It's the builder of the project. So it's financing outside the municipal realm. I don't believe there's any way to do balloon financing under the municipal realm because you've actually got an escalating debt which you're not paying down, and the province hates that as our debt, and it won't provide you with a mechanism to do it.
Very creative Director of Finance.
We can ask. We can ask.
Yeah. So, anyway, there, you know, are there other ways of doing it is really the question, and then I guess the other piece to Emmett is when you bring it back with all the costs, it would be helpful to know if there are some pieces that we could do later as opposed to now, or sort of somewhat separately. In other words, could we do all of the stuff, focus on doing all of the stuff along Kelly Road, and much as I love the kind of the 80 Greenway, is that something that we could do, add on at a later stage, including closure of the road at a later stage? In other words, does it have to be kind of all part of the same piece, or is that a piece that could be done as an add-on in 5 years' time when cities' coffers are replenished? So I don't necessarily need an answer for that now, but when you bring it back,
I could give you
Can
an
you
answer
think
for it
about-
now and bring it back to you later as well.
okay,
I mean, just the quick answer is it'll be inexpensive. We could do it later.
Yeah.
We could certainly do it later. I'm not certain that I'm going to recommend that we close 80 at this point.
Okay.
I think I like what's happening out there, and I have a modification to that, where the bike lanes actually go outside of the road. As the road tightens up, bike lanes become part of the sidewalks and then go back to bike lanes.
okay.
It's kind of a neat, you'll love it. So there's that way to go, and that kind of stuff would be ideal for Public Works. So I'll leave that.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
2 questions. Were the folks that were signed up for the information that said that they wanted to be kept in the loop, were they invited to this meeting tonight to know what we'd be
No,
discussing?
they weren't.
And when you were at this, well, I get that it was a good sense of neighborhood, and when I read some of the comments, I get the sense that there's some people that are opposed to anything. And it doesn't matter what you suggest. They want to keep Kelly Road exactly the way it is. And I wonder, are they voters? But are they interested rather than just being naysayers? And do they need to be kept involved in this and understand what's going to happen? Or are they just people that come out and say no to everything? I mean, I deal with those people all the time at work, and it is a type of person. But I guess the question is, are they organized, and are they going to resist everything that we're trying to do? Even though I believe that we have a vision for the future, they have a vision for the weekend.
It's a great question, and it's funny you should mention it, because during that meeting, near the end of that meeting, I remember saying to the transportation consultant, you know, if we can get 85% of the people 85% happy with the project, like 85% of these people are happy with 85% of the project, that's a win. That's what we're after. Because there's one of those guys is going to be completely unhappy no matter what we do, probably two. And so we're at 10% of the people that are, I think, where you're at, as you're talking about, and then the others are, 10% of the people are going to love whatever we do or nothing.
Yeah, I think 80% would be a win.
Something like that. So yeah, I think that did I answer the question?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
So, Emmett, for the clarification, you're suggesting the recommendation be changed to say that staff spend up to, I can hear Shari saying there is no up to, that staff spend up to $15,000 from the current budget for Kelly Road, yada yada, for proposed sewer construction and
roads.
And
Yeah,
transportation.
I've been rethinking that. If I could just, I think maybe we should leave the roads, I think maybe we should leave the roads out of it and understand that we've been working on the roads all the way along.
Okay.
And say just the $10,000 for sewer.
So you're sticking with the original recommendation
We'll
as
come back to
presented
the
here?
recommendation.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I don't know, I'd like to call a friend.
You have 5 seconds to change your mind.
All right.
Seeing no mind changing over there, first of all, any further discussion on this one? And if not, is somebody interested in making the staff recommendation? Councillor Logan. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favour? Carried. Awesome.
If I
Thank you.
remember rightly, the penalty for changing your mind on a resolution like that from staff is to buy the beer at the pub, isn't it?
I think that's an excellent
I'm
suggestion.
completely happy with doing that. Long
We'll take care
Well,
of
it's single malt night.
that. Okay.
Not bringing that
For
forward.
that, we're going to the 5 mile,
Okay, we have 2 items left on the agenda, folks.
certainly.
Emmett Capital Project Update.
Oh, yes.
Oh, there's a purple, yeah.
Okay. I have a list here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Nora's going to get one of these versions at the end.
Thank you.
So this is, I'm not going to
Thank you.
speak to all of this. I'll just sort of touch on it. Getting over to the microphone. Sorry, Nora, you don't have this, but I'm going to give it to you. That's right. Yeah. Absolutely. So the Metchosin Road sewers. Again, this is the gravity sewer main from the church, 2244 Souk Road to 3151 Metchosin Road. Includes the construction of the Allendale Sewage Lift Station. This RFP, just short and sweet, the RFP is going to go out late this week or early next on this. And I don't know, that's for the design.
Yeah.
And then we'll
That's
go
the
from there.
design of the Metchosin sewers only. Because we need that done in order to go to the Metchosin Road residents and say, do you wish to be a part of this?
Yep.
That's a requirement.
Okay. So that's where we're at on that one. Metchosin Road bike lanes. This is a bike lane project that's going to follow the sewers, so it's likely to be carried forward to 2015 at this point. Because we're not, once the sewers go in, we're going to actually put the sewer in a location that's going to benefit the building of the bike lanes. Wishart and Carindale was completed in April. That was that intersection project. And although it was completed in April. There's still one corner of it where that gentleman built, where he had a subdivision, and I think 5 or 6 years ago, that fellow there. Marty, okay. Now, when we built this project, we put a sleeve into that grassy area that he's got out front. So we'll come back to that. We might come back to that and get that one fixed up. We'll see what happens here. But we'll come forward to you for that if we do. So the Wishart Road sidewalk, Carindale to Wishart School, project's completed. All invoices have not yet been received. However, we know we're under budget on that, and probably by a pretty good piece of change. So as the paving was being estimated, it determined that we had the opportunity to completely overlay the pavement to the center line of the road, thereby renewing the road section completely, because the other lane was renewed during utility construction a few years back. So the paving estimate has these two costs separated, and the appropriate portion, which was the bike lane, the new bike lane needed to be done under this this project. And then we have a road overlay budget, and we thought, you know what, let's make this road whole right now. So we have a brand new road out there. Brand new as in 6 years old on the one side. So, which in roads terms is brand new. So those two costs have been separated, and we know what those are, so that works. And then, again, part of the communications plan for the project, we took flyers and delivered it to the residents prior to the commencement of construction. And the connection to Ackland Road initially posed some concerns for the residents because it was built to that 6.5 meter standard. And what happened is the residents saw the barricades and the construction and the bumpy road at the edges and complained that we were going to be causing accidents and people would be crashing into each other. And we went over and met with them and heard what they had to say. And 18 people came out from that street, which was pretty significant. There were a lot of people there. And so we walked through it and talked through the project and asked them to bear with us as we got it paved and said, you know, give us a couple of weeks into September. And the one fellow from one of the residents said, you know what, why don't we wait until the middle of October and give it a real good shake and see how it is. And so we agreed that what we'll do is we'll come back and talk with them in October, and then we'll, you know, if the residents say, yeah, you know what, this is fine, this works great, then we'll just let it go. We'll come back and we'll tell you that happened. If they say, you know, we'd still like to see it wider, we'll take a look at it and see what we need to do. The nice part of that is the corner that we'd have to widen out. It's just a curb, and right next to it is a great big rain garden. And so just knocking out a curb, putting a little wider and putting a little more pavement would be pretty inexpensive to do. I don't think we're going to have to do it. I think it's working really nicely. If you, next time you get a chance and you're going by, just take that corner, drive down, turn around, come back out again. It's good. Yeah. So, again, once we've got the numbers in on this and we're final on it, for about $3,500, we could go back into the first project and clean up that other corner, do the irrigation, plant it the same way as everything else has been planted, and really, that corner is going to be the eyesore of the whole thing if we don't do that. So we might be able to do that and still stay significantly under budget on the overall two projects. So if it looks like we have that opportunity, we'll come back with a request to do so, and we'll get that done this year. And that's the end of that one. Okay, Kelly Road, we talked about. Crosswalk on VMP at Havenwood. We haven't moved very far on this. We still have the issue with the power and the lighting because there is no power anywhere near that intersection. And our transportation consultants are adamant that we can't put in what amounts to a mid-block pedestrian crossing without some downlighting. They work, they work great on solar. They just flash the yellow lights, but when you get into the downlighting, even the LEDs are not hugely more efficient. I think they take about 35% of the power of normal street lights, but that's still a significant amount of power. And so we're exploring the options of having those triggered by motion detectors so that when people come up to it, it enables them and they come on, and seeing what that might do.
May I say, not just people,
Or deer.
but deer triggering it would actually be a good thing.
Yep. Yeah. An actual deer crossing.
Yeah. Perhaps they'll learn to stop there where the light
Push
is.
the button.
Well, the thing is, what was that one that we saw where the person said that you know, you put the
Yeah,
sign
I know,
up and
but I
the
do.
deer still don't get
Deer
it.
don't
Yeah.
follow the
They
sign.
don't, they don't
Yes.
read the sign.
Yeah.
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 Same guy complained.
So that's where we're at with that. Yeah, I want to make a promise that says this is going to be done by the end of November, but I'm just don't think it's going to happen. So
Are we asking questions as we go through?
Please.
Or after?
Yeah.
sorry. Your call.
Your call.
Yeah, let's ask them as we go through. Gordy, go.
Just a quick question regarding that one. If it looks like it's going to wait until next year, is there any way that we could construct a bridge over that small creek thing and the trail? Because it's an important connector. I actually
Yeah.
just walked it for the
The
first time the other day.
the rationale for doing the two together, because this has sort of come through Parks and TPI, is that we don't want to encourage people to cross the creek and therefore cross the road when we don't have a safe way for them to cross the road. So the idea was to do the two pieces together. So
Yeah, which I understand. But if it's going to be delayed,
This conversation's important.
you know, it could be, it could be an important link. You know, like get down to the Red Barn and whatnot. I just don't want to see us lose, you know, like the grant and whatnot. That's my piece.
Yeah, we'll check the date on the grant, make sure we don't lose that.
Sunridge Valley Drive traffic calming. So detailed design of that project is, we're working on it now, and it should be completed probably by the end of next week. And then we want to get them in. Our promise is for September, so we want them in by September because we know that we will hear about it if they're not in by the end of September.
yes, you will.
Those are some pretty organized residents there. That's good. The interesting thing there is that's a pretty wide road. So it's not just a matter of putting 3 speed humps. We've got to go wider than that, or we find some way to. So it'll be interesting. We're working through that.
Course there.
Mm-hmm.
That's where they
Yeah.
call Colwood Grand Prix could be run through there.
Yeah, it really could. Transportation master plan. So we have a final draft. We don't want to give it to you yet because, quite frankly, I'm a little bothered by some of the language, and I mean just the grammar and the way it's written. And I'm meeting with them on Friday to go through it, and I'm probably going to be the most part of my day going through every single page of it and just cleaning it all up. And then it'll come to, at that point, I think we will want to get it out to council and bring it to this in an unofficial way for review. I think Ian did that with the economic development plan, and I think it was a pretty good way to go, just to kind of get it out and get people's input and feedback on it. So it may get emailed to you, but not bring it directly to a meeting at that point. I wanted to talk.
So
Chair,
what's
with
the
public process.
what's the timeline for getting it completed? Sort of thinking that, you know, like the economic development plan, it would be nice to complete under this council, so you're not having to
Absolutely.
work with a new group.
Well, that's a month.
The timeline to get it completed is that we will do a major, on Friday, we'll sink our teeth into it in a big way. And I think at that point, they'll go away and they will write the real final draft, or rewrite it and correct the issues that are in it. And then it will come to the next TMPI, I would think, which is.
So we should have it for the October
But
6th meeting.
we could.
Point where I need to jump in.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to be suggesting that we keep a date open for a mid-September TNPI. Because we have the RFP for the first major work on the sewage treatment closed about a week ago, and I'm expecting the result in time for a meeting on the 15th, 16th, or 17th. And I'd like to get that moving as soon as possible. I'm also expecting.
So are you bringing that through this committee or taking it direct to council?
No, it's really.
Okay.
And I'm also expecting a proposal for solar power to the public works yard, so that we don't need to replace the backup generator. And I'd like to bring that to this committee too.
All right. So when we get to next meeting date, are you going to bring that up again?
work for the transportation plan.
It may work for all
Okay.
three to come to this. It
That'd
might-
be good.
To me,
Okay.
I think September 15, 16, 17 might be a little bit early. It might be more like, it might be more like 21, 22.
When's, I was going to say there's UBCM that week, so you're not going to get anybody.
What is the UBCM week?
22nd? So, the 15th is the Monday prior,
Yep.
and after that, it's the,
Week of the 15th or week of the 29th, which is getting us pretty close into the...
But it means we should probably have, there will be other things that come to that meeting. I'd still like to have a special meeting just for the Transportation Master Plan, which means a lot of meetings for us, unfortunately.
Okay. All right, let's
Get her done.
kind of hold that thought. Okay, Emmett, I'm going to get you to go back, focus, finish this, and then
Okay,
our other items.
Rainwater Management Plan, the RFP has been modified to harmonize the potential testing requirements for the infiltration of tertiary treated effluent from a potential sewage treatment plant. So we've included that we need to be testing groundwater and monitoring groundwater. And also to provide the basis for an integrated urban ecology plan with the urban forest strategy. The reason being is those two things go hand in hand. And it seems that nobody ever makes that connection, but it seems that Colwood is a place where we do plans that are really well connected. And so we saw an opportunity to do this, and I went to Ian and recommended that we consider these two plans together as the urban ecology plan. And so he likes that idea. And so we're just making sure that these two things are going to dovetail well. That RFP is expected to be issued within this week or early next week again as well. It's ready to go at this point. Okay.
Sounds good?
Okay. Trees for tomorrow, 500 trees have been ordered. Planting is expected to take place in October. We are exploring the options to engage volunteers in the planting of these trees. I had a nice conversation with a young lady who you met when I worked in View Royal, Amanda Evans,
Yes.
who is working with an organization now that is a green volunteer organization, and she said that her people would be all over this. And
Wonderful.
we'll talk tomorrow about that. So we may do quite well with the volunteers there. Already what's happening in that park, which is in
And this is Cold Creek Park, right?
Old Creek Park, thank you, yes, is the beds are being prepared by the Parks Department for that. So that work's underway right now, but we're not going to plant until October because we want to plant in a good time to plant. So that's your update. On capital projects.
Emmett, question, how big are the trees?
There are three different sizes. The number one pot, there's some little tiny ones, and I think they go up to 1.5 meters. And there's 500 of them, so.
Different species?
Yes, and I don't have the answer as to what the species are. Sorry.
Cool. Excellent.
I think so.
So, committee, any other questions on this? Thank you, Emmett. Nice. Move receipt. All those in favour? Carried.
So you did,
Gordy, Councillor Logan. How formal do you want
speak
me to be?
tomorrow, or I'll give it to you digitally.
Okay, final item on our agenda, being the report for typical cross sections.
Typical
Who
cross-section.
gets that one?
I get that one.
That'd be an Emmett one.
Thank you, Chair. So about a year ago, we brought forward the right-of-way cross-section and for approval and through to council and through this committee to council. And since then, we've been collaborating with the development group in developing better cross-sections for this. And through their transportation consultants, our staff, we think we've come up with some really good positive changes, including rain gardens and swales for stormwater management, wider sidewalks and sidewalks on both sides of what they call local road, narrower traffic lanes to promote traffic calming, and also to reduce the overall hard surfacing, defined and intermittent street parking bays which allows for traffic calming as well, curb bump outs, Flat and inverted gutter curbing, which is really important to Rob, and I will confess I don't really know what the advantage of that is, but there it is. Wider boulevards, which will provide for more growing area for boulevard trees and other planting areas. Dedicated cycling lanes with buffer area, and these are the buffered cycling lanes that you've seen us bring forward in our transportation plan as well, where there's about a half a meter or a variable size of buffer that's a painted buffer, and it just provides a real safe place to cycle. And the thing about that is we're trying to get people to cycle from 8 to 80 years old, and that's the kind of safety you need, where you're not going to get clipped by a car. Okay, so 4.5 meter wide multi-use pathway in the Ryder Heshdall Way cross section. More pedestrian oriented LED lighting. And what we've decided there is that, and we're deciding this, I think, citywide, is that what we want to do is the vehicles and the cyclists have their headlights and their taillights. And so we really don't need the asphalt to be illuminated except at intersections. So what we're looking at is illuminating the pedestrian walkways until you get to the intersections, and then having those lit up where there's crossings, or even where there's not crossings, but just at the intersections. And then moving forward from there, and it contributes to, promotes our dark sky, and keeps our energy costs low with the LEDs as well. And it just gives a better feel to the community as well. So the following typical cross sections have been submitted, which is the emergency connector, which is the connector to Painter Road, which is basically a multi-use path. It's not a vehicle connector. We're not going there. And it's not a transit connector. Thank you, Councillor Logan. We'll tell you about that over afterwards. So all of the cross sections here are presented, and staff are very confident that these are the directions that we want to go in, and our recommendation is that council approve the typical cross section submitted, or actually the recommendation would be that the committee recommend that council approve the typical cross sections submitted for the emergency connector, residential lane, local road, minor collector road, and arterial road in Royal Bay, and direct staff to prepare the required bylaw amendments.
Thanks, Emmett. Committee. Greg.
When talking about the roadway lighting, you're talking about overhead lighting.
That's correct.
Is there, to divide the lanes, there'll still be a painted fog line,
Yes.
and there'll still be lighting or reflectors where necessary down the center?
Yes, where necessary, not necessarily on residential streets, but
Right.
certainly on collectors and above. Those would be input. Yeah.
Okay, so it may not be lighting shining down, but there'll still be guidance at night.
Yeah, and the
Parking's
lane lines themselves are guidance themselves.
Right. Okay, so that's not changed?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Give Cody anything? Cody.
Yeah, I was just asking, what thermoplast is.
What, thermoplast?
Yeah.
Oh, it's actually plastic that's put down in the place of paint. It has glass beads in it, very highly reflective. It lasts anywhere from 3 to 5 years, as opposed to 1 to 1 and a bit years. So it's very much more durable, and it's just a much better product in terms of our long-term maintenance. Because once they put down the street and they paint it all up, unless it's a strata road, it's ours to maintain, and so the thermoplast is a much more cost-effective way for us to go. No, it rises above. It's a little bit of a bump to it. It can. In this case, it should be okay because it's going to be a freshly paved road that gets thermoplast put down. What happens is when you've had a road that's maybe 10 or 15 years old and you try to put thermoplast on that, it may not bond as well as the fresh pavement will.
But also when you get layers of thermoplastic built up, because part of it's disappeared, they just coat the whole thing again. And you can eventually get it so high that the plows just have to knock it off.
So there is that maintenance to it as well, but the overall result is that it's a better product. It gives it's a higher quality, and it's a net reduction in
definitely safe.
Yeah, and the nice thing is it's, yeah, it does save money. I was going off on a tangent there. Getting late.
It's been a long day.
I was just gonna say the thermoplast, I know it's far more visible than the regular painting. Last week,
Yeah.
it's far easier to follow the road with that.
Yeah, the glass bead and the thermoplastic, really, it's like a bunch of little lenses that just reflects your light right back at you. It's great.
My only question, Emmett, is there an opportunity, without slowing this down, to also give Cycling Advisory Committee and IACTI a chance to look at this?
Depends on the timing, but I know where you're going and we should do so.
I'm just thinking even if we email information out to them and say, this is going forward to council next Monday, please comment, even if we give them a little bit of an opportunity after that to comment. I just think that they're both important groups, and I think they should have an opportunity to take a peek at it.
Thank you.
Just a quick question, and it probably doesn't have anything to do with the road cross sections, but where would we spell out the standard for sidewalk design and sidewalk treatments and special little funky things and
Public art.
public art,
Yep.
right in
You want to know where we would put that? Like in
Yeah.
here or?
well, it probably wouldn't be the cross section.
No, that'll be in our subdivision servicing standards. That's where that would come in. And I think there's probably a public art policy that we want to bring forward at some point as well.
Some of this could be discussed.
Well, yeah.
I was going to say, I noticed the city engineer is packed up and ready to move on, so the meeting must be over. Okay. No, joking apart, any other comments on this one? Would somebody like to move the recommendation?
I'll move the recommendation.
So moved. Greg? Any other discussion? All those in favour? Carried. Lovely. Just before we do that next meeting, so I think I heard somebody say you want us to hold the week of the 15th. I believe Monday the 15th will be Parks Committee and Finance, so we're probably looking at the 17th.
I will not be here.
Okay.
Parks Committee and Finance is on a Monday, isn't it?
Parks Committee and Finance is on the Monday. Planning and Land Use is on the Tuesday. So we're looking at the Wednesday the 17th or Thursday the 18th. If you want to do that week.
What's the next week?
The following week is UBCM. I'm here, but Gordy's not.
You're not going?
I'm not going to UBCM.
Where is it?
UBCM's Whistler.
It's probably a bad time to do anything because the whole of council
Is yeah.
and
It's not a great.
doing it when they're out of town, it doesn't look.
17th, 18th is a better.
Right before an election.
Yeah.
Is a yeah. 17th, 18th is a better time.
When is the election?
November the 15th.
That's on a Saturday?
17th may be tough.
Is the 18th possible? Is the 18th possible for you?
I'll be
Actually,
on my way to Newfoundland.
Oh, right. Ay, ay, ay.
Notif-
18th September, right?
I think our notification for transportation is too tight for that.
Okay. 17th, 18th are good for me. Are you available on the 18th? Okay. Nora, it sounds like we've got 3 of us for the 18th. That's a Thursday.
Works for me.
I'll take the transportation later.
Okay.
I need to make sure I give enough notification to
All right.
people about the pitchfork.
All right. So the next 2 meetings are the 18th and then October 6th.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to miss that one too. I'm going to be in Mexico.
You,
Newfoundland.
Well, they go to